Many people aspire to be professional athletes. There was much excitement recently in the Orthodox community over two young men that were drafted by MLB, by Major League Baseball. But if you think about it, with high reward also comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of stress. And we've seen that tremendous pressure recently. Two world-class athletes have run into tremendous pressure or problems, mental health issues, in trying to perform their craft. First, we saw Naomi Osaka, the well-known female tennis player, who withdrew from the French Open and didn't play in Wimbledon either. And she just played in the Olympics, but she just lost her match, unfortunately, in her hometown of Tokyo. And she talked about the mental health toll that it takes to perform at such a high level. And just today, Simone Biles, who is a world-class gymnast, considered the best ever in her class, in her craft, also was not able to perform really I'm not a gymnast, but from what I understand, even a basic type of maneuver that she can presumably do in her sleep, but because of the tremendous pressure and the taxing mental toll of being in such great spotlight, also caused her to step down. Yesterday, I was actually at a charity event. I was playing golf, and part of my foursome was an individual who I know from many, many years ago, but really haven't interacted with in, I don't know, like 20 years or so, probably even more than that. And we began to talk. He was asking me what I do. Of course, I asked him what he does. And I was sharing with him that I'm in process of writing a new book. And I shared with him in that context that I had written the book 5 years ago. He's like, "Oh, what was the book called? Well, what's the book about?" So I said, "Oh, that book was about dealing with challenges, overcoming challenges." I shared with him that I got married relatively late for the Orthodox Jewish community. I shared with him that my first child was born with a disability. So I wrote a book about dealing with these challenges. And he actually shared with me, he volunteered, that over the last year and a half or so, he's been dealing with severe depression and issues of anxiety. And he was actually contrasting it with my situation. He's like, unlike you, who had these outright outward challenges, my life was perfect. I didn't have any challenges. I'm popular, I'm well regarded, I do well financially, I have a beautiful family. And somehow I just felt a tremendous void and a gap in my life. And I had I dealt with a lot of demons, and I had to kind of overcome these great challenges and these difficulties. So first of all, I always admire people that are so open with their challenges and they're willing to kind of make themselves vulnerable. I didn't sense that this guy cared at all, like about being judged or what anybody would think of him. He was talking about it pretty openly, which was pretty impressive. I'm not sure everybody would be comfortable doing that, but it just kind of it reaffirmed for me this challenge that we're seeing all around us in the world at large. I saw also just a great quote today from Adam Grant, the renowned professor of psychology, the organizational psychologist at the Wharton School. He actually said something amazing. He said, "It's okay to call in sick. It should be okay to call in sad too. There's no stigma if you get the flu or break your leg. We need the same compassion for emotional pain as physical pain. Failing to address mental health leaves people suffering in silence." Just thinking that we here in North Woodmere have just suffered a terrible, terrible calamity and tragedy. A young man, 32 years old, unexpectedly taken from us this past Sunday, leaving behind a young wife and a young baby, and certainly shocking and astounding. And the community at large has been dealing with all different types of trauma and tragedy and difficulty over the last many months, whether it was in Surfside, Florida, whether it was at Meron, whether it was other events. So, and even in the broader five towns, there are other young people that have passed suddenly in recent weeks and recent months. And I think there's a certain heaviness and there's a certain weightiness that if one is a contemplative thinking person and they reflect on basically just, the how quickly, how vulnerable we all are and how quickly life can be taken unexpectedly, it's a moment for pause, and it brings a certain heaviness, and it can bring a certain sense of foreboding. And I think it's important that we as chevra, as friends, as caring people, are giving people space to maybe not be in the best possible mood at all times. And people shouldn't have to feel the weight of having to fake it and to act like, "Oh, I'm great. How are you? Baruch Hashem, I'm amazing." things are gewaldic, and often, sometimes that's really true. And sometimes we're kind of trained that we have to speak that way because that's just kind of the discourse. Like, can you imagine you ask somebody like, how are you doing? And he goes, I'm miserable. Like, people wouldn't know what to do with that. It would make them very uncomfortable. So I think there's a certain social etiquette that we kind of have to present a better front than may be the reality, unless, of course, we're with people that we're very close with, or we really feel confident that we can confide in, so on and so forth. So I found that just kind of this tone that's going on in society at large, in terms of professional athletes, in terms of Adam Grant's comment that this is something that's certainly on the world agenda, mental health after the pandemic, so on and so forth. But I just wanted to make this point that it's crucial that we be cognizant and aware of the challenging times in which we live, and because of that, it can bring a certain weightiness or heaviness. That's not, we want to try to not be in that spirit all the time, but at the same time, we have to give ourselves space to understand that life isn't perfect and there can be difficult times and there can be times when we're maybe not at our best. And we as friends and supporters and employers, or whatever the context may be, also have to be aware of that and more sensitive to that, and not be so critical and not judge people, no matter what their stature or status. I saw people kind of ripping into Simone Biles in terms of, like, I was like, it's ridiculous, like nonsense. Like, nobody knows the battle that somebody else is confronting or dealing with. And because somebody has to do it in front of, a gazillion people, there's no less of a reason to be sympathetic and empathetic and empathic, and to understand that obviously, people want to do the best they can. And sometimes they're just not able to. Sometimes it's a physical disability, sometimes an emotional, mental disability. And there should be a certain equivalency on that front. Wishing everybody a great day and a lot of success.